What's up, ASM family? Welcome to ASMTV. As many of you know, we won't be holding service as normal, but we decided to do something very special for you. As you know, we're in the middle of a sermon series called Danger of the Dreamer. And what we decided to do this week, instead of you just hearing from me, on all of our different social media platforms, you're gonna get to hear from some amazing students and leaders. And we're gonna talk about some different things concerning what it means to have a call from God and how we know what God's dream for our life is. So here's what I need you to do. First of all, I need you to watch the entire video. Don't skip through anything, watch all of it. But secondly, I want you to go to our social media platforms, whether it be on Instagram, Facebook, or our brand new YouTube channel called ASMTV, and I need you to share it like crazy. I want you to comment what you think about the video. I want you to tag people in it because we have something very special planned for you. So I need you to go ahead and tune in. We're glad that you're watching and joining us on ASMTV. Nick, I like it, man. It's flip-flop season.
I know, you know?
I'm rocking the flannel. It's still winter.
You just gotta get
alright? What's up, buddy?
Marion, how?
What is up, y'all? Hey, welcome to episode 1 of Dream Talk.
It's great to be here.
And so right now it's the middle of March. What was it, like March 17th or something? And like, as you know, like we're in the springtime coming towards the summer. And so like, for many of us, like this is kind of a weird time because like some of us, will be graduating high school. And I noticed this thing whenever like summertime's approaching, especially for seniors, whether it be like your parent or like any adult you ever meet, whether it be in Walmart in casual conversation, like they always ask this question, and I want to see what y'all think about it. They always say, well, what are you going to do after high school? Right? Have you noticed that? Has anyone heard that question before? Like, how do y'all respond to that? Is it weird?
I already know what I'm gonna be doing, so like, but sometimes I don't know because I'm only 15. I'm only in 9th grade, so I don't really know what I'm gonna do, but.
So you're confused?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's a little different for me because I am a senior and I'm not like super solidified in my decision. So I can always see the look on their face when I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. And they're like, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, okay, is it really okay? But again, like you just have to rest assured that like God has a plan for you. As long as you're staying true to Him, then He'll keep you where you need to be.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like people put a pressure on you, you know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like you have to have everything figured out, And so that's why I decided, like, let's have this conversation about, like, whatever our dreams are in life or our callings for whenever we do graduate high school. And so what I did was I actually wrote down, I have a piece of paper, and I wrote down, like, some different questions along, the idea of, like, dreaming for God and what we're going to do for Him or what our assignment is, right? And so I want y'all to answer this question. I want to see what y'all think about it. But does it seem like scary thinking about graduating high school or, not everyone in this group is a senior. Some of us are actually even out of high school or freshmen in high school. But like, does it seem scary or like intimidating thinking about that next chapter in your life? What do y'all think about that?
I think for me, for the longest time, it was super scary because I've always known what God had called me to, but I doubted what He called me to because I didn't think I was equipped to do that. So for the longest time, it was super scary, but I had a lot of people speak into my life, especially my mom was one of them, and just let me know, like, look, like, God's called you this, like, you have the ability to do this. And I eventually had to realize that God is in control of my life, and I can't control my life because, God has already gone before me and planned my life out for me, and I had to realize that. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, like, there's no need for me to be scared because God has my next steps. Like, I just have to focus on Him, and when I focus on Him, like, I'll be okay.
Right.
And so for me, it was just trusting in God and just knowing that He had my future planned out for me.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It is super intimidating. But then again, I feel like we have so much pressure coming in from the world, but I feel like a lot of the time, it's pressure we're putting on ourselves that's going to thing. And one thing that's been spoken over me a lot is God's never going to give you more than you can handle. You know what I mean? Like, He knows exactly what He's placing in your hands. So I feel like it's what you do with what He's giving to you. And also, like, are you going to go off and pursue what you want for you, or are you going to pursue what God has planned for you?
Right.
Yeah, exactly with that. Like, my whole life I've desired to go into this one specific field, and I feel like God's calling me there, but then just recently I've really felt like God's calling me somewhere else. And, I just got super nervous because I feel like I am going to pursue the first one. But I feel like as if I'm deciding, like, this is what I want to do, God. You can make it work for your plan through this, but I don't want to do that because I do want to fully just devote to God. So it's like nerve-wracking for me to like make the decision because God honors our decisions, whether it be right or wrong. So
Yeah, I can relate to that because when I was younger, I've always loved like animals and stuff, so I've always wanted to be like a veterinarian. But like now as I've gotten older, I feel like I'm being called to like, I still want to be a doctor, but I want to work with people and do missionary work. So
That's cool. I guess it's safe to say Marion is smarter than all of us. Because your boy would end up hurting somebody if he was a doctor.
Yeah.
I guarantee that. Like, you do not want to be your surgeon. I can't even play operation. I feel like, you know what I'm saying? But I like what y'all brought up because, like, and you brought up even a term I could say is like, I felt like I was called to this, but now I kind of feel called to this, you know? And like, I feel like we're all on like a journey, especially in this age, you know, in high school and really even after high school. Is like, what am I called to do, right? And so I think that kind of brings up like a next question is that like, and you can answer it however you see fit. There's no right or wrong answer, but like, how do you figure out God's dream or calling for your life? How do you determine that?
I know I've like learned this, like, I mean, I'm older than pretty much all of y'all. I know like 7 years removed from high school, I've learned that God uses you for your gifts. So you have to figure out what you're passionate about, because when you figure out what you're passionate about, God uses you with that. Like, I'm passionate about kids and youth, so God's been using me through that. I remember whenever when I graduated in 2013. I graduated, I didn't know what I was gonna do. So I took a year off, and then I went to culinary school, and God said, no, stop. You need to start taking ministry classes. Because before I graduated, he called me to be a missionary. So when he called me to that, like, I'll tell you right now, I still don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know that's God's calling on my life. And I know that he wants to lead us from glory to glory to glory. So I don't want to rush it, because when you rush it, you get out of his will, and you don't want to be out of his will.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah.
That's so good. I know Pastor Blake has told me really evaluate your gifts and your hobbies even. And I feel like if you lay those things over to God, he will open doors for me. Worship has always, like, ever since I was a little girl, I would like stand up on the fireplace and like sing. But one, you have to realize if it's a stage you feel like you're being called to, or not that you're being called to, but if that's what your eyes on, then like, that's never going to work out for you. You have to make sure it's a God thing. Right. And I feel like praying about it, there's so much power in prayer. And even though you don't get an answer right whenever you feel like you should get the answer, God hears you. Right. And God speaks through various different ways.
Yeah, like, if you don't know what you're doing, whenever you're younger, you could just pray for it. Because, like she said, if he doesn't answer it, like, then and there, he will answer it. Just keep on praying for it, because, I mean, you never know if it will happen or not.
Right.
You know?
That's neat. I like that because, like, I almost think we can overcomplicate it. You know what I'm saying? Like, what am I going to call it? What am I called to do? If I mess this up, I'm in trouble. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be out of the will of God, you know? And I like, there's almost a few different perspectives. Like, one, you know, Jake was like, you know, pray about it. And, like, let's be real. You know, God can audibly speak to you like, hey, you know, this is what you're called to do. But also, I think sometimes, like, we got to, you know, be careful of the perspective. Like, he's going to call me to do something that I hate. You know what I'm saying? And that's where y'all's perspective, I think, is really neat, because you're like, what are you passionate about? You know, and sometimes I think God asks us the same question. We're like, God, what are we called to? He's like, what are you passionate about? You know, what giftings have I put inside of you? And I like that. Like, for example, Raina, she's got some pipes. She can sing, right? And myself, no. You know what I'm saying? like, I never forget whenever I was younger, I went, this is an embarrassing story. I went to talk to my mom. I was like, Mom, I want to be a singer when I get older. Can y'all imagine me doing that? I was like, Mom, listen to this. I started singing, and I'll never forget. This is how I knew I wasn't gifted or called to sing. I remember I was singing. She looked at me. She was like, "That's great. That's great, Blake. That's really great." And like, she didn't have to say anything else. I was like, "Oh no, I suck." You know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna do something else. So yeah, I think like your passions and giftings, you know, do play a role in that. But I want to read the scripture real quick, because like I think the Bible does hint at that. You know, I'd hate for us to have a whole conversation without bringing in a little bit, you know, of a foundation to rely on. And it actually goes along with everything that's being said. It's in Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now watch this. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I love that because it almost seems like, we try to strive and figure out, what am I going to do? What am I called to do? But sometimes I feel like we find our purpose, like just being in a relationship with Him. And it's in that place where you find passion. Like, how when you go in to pray, you leave, like, you're like, oh, I could take over the world. You know what I'm saying? And like, God puts passions and desires in you. And like, then you leave that place of being in prayer and like, giftings start coming out of you, anointings that God's placed on your life. And so I like that. I like those answers because, it tells you like, I feel like we find our purpose in His presence. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense? I really do feel like, and that's the best way to not overcomplicate it, because then there's no reason to worry, But this kind of goes into the next question. I want to see what y'all think about this. Because, like, some of you, for example, Marion, you know what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? And I'm assuming, whenever you're excited, like, whenever you find out what you want to do in life, you get excited about it. Like, we should be, And then we want to start telling people, right? Including our parents, right? Like, Mom, I want to go to this college, And so here's the question, because this is very common, but have you had any backflash telling others about your dreams or aspirations? Like, has anyone given you, like, negative response or, like, advice that you're like, eh?
Yeah, for me, that's something I've really struggled with because it's actually been, has come from my family, which is really hard because obviously you want the closest people to you to be the ones that uplift you and what you feel God is calling you to. And I feel God is calling me into ministry, and I told my family about it one time. And they were like, well, that's awesome. Like, you can do that, but there's not a lot of money in that. They're so money focused, which I feel like a lot of people in this world are. And they were like, well, maybe you should just do something else. Like, you can do that on the side. Like, you can still do that, but just do it on the side. Do something that has more stability, something that you can fall back into. And I was like, well, that's awesome. Like, yeah, that's a good thing. Money, we live in a world where money is important. You need money to do things. But I don't ever want to do something that God's not calling me to, because I know that if that's where He's calling me to, He's going to provide me with the things I need to do what He's called me to. And that's just something that I've had to realize. And yeah, it's hard to have family that are like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. But for me, one thing that I've had to do is just pray for their hearts, just pray that God speaks to them and helps them to see that, okay, yeah, this is where He's calling her. And just help them to have softer hearts about where God is calling me to.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because my whole family, on every single aspect, is in the ministry field. And I feel like a lot of times everyone wants what's best for you. But ministry a lot of times isn't attached to a dollar sign, which is associated with success a lot of times. But at the end of the day, I feel like if they see that God has placed something in you, He's working that within you. All things are working for God's good and His glory. So I think people will acknowledge that. Yeah.
Yeah, because our true success comes just when we are totally devoted to God. Because the worldly success is the money, and how what car you have, and how big your house is, and how much land you sit on, and all these different things. But if you really have a mind focus of this stuff doesn't totally matter, because we're only here for about 80 years on average, and it's eternal joy is in heaven. So. Just the aspect of how our success comes from God is just really powerful.
Yeah, and I agree. And as a freshman, it's really hard because I'm just getting into high school, and but I feel like God is still calling me into other things that I just don't know yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not realizing. But right now, I play soccer and I love it, and it's the thing I kind of want to do when I get older, because I was thinking of being a professional soccer player.
Yeah.
And because being a professional soccer player, you can get a lot of money off that, and you can play in big games with with people watching and stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like God wants me to do something else, but I'm not sure, because I'm still really young.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, my friends, I get a lot of backlash because whenever we came home from a mission trip, I was so pumped up because Because like whenever the Spirit of God fell on me, I was like ready to take on the world, like you said. But whenever I got back, I told my friends that they were like, yeah, that's really cool. I could tell that they were very supportive of me because most of my friends, they don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
So like, but like, I feel like he put me in that place so I could tell them whenever I came back. I get a lot of backlash because I am called in the ministry now from that trip.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't really bother me because whenever I came back, you know, I was a whole new person. So I didn't really care what other people thought. But I knew what I was gonna do whenever I got.
I like that because like I like this group that we have here for this because like you know some of us are called to the ministry, others are not, and that's fine. We all have our own calling. You know, it's not like we should put one above the other. So I love that we have like a diverse group. Like we have a doctor, right? We have someone who wants to be a professional soccer player, and then we have others who want to go to the ministry. You know. But like, you know, the question was like, have you received backlash? And like, I think what it boils down to is like, have you received pressure, right, from people, you know? And so this isn't even on this paper, but like, it kind of makes me think of another question. Like, and I think Raina, you might have even hinted at it. And I know this is something, being in youth ministry, youth pastor, like, I think I even struggle with still today, but like, instead of just people putting pressure on us, do you think we put too much pressure on ourselves?
Yeah.
What do y'all think?
I think for me, because my biggest fear in life is getting to end my life and not doing what God called me to do. Right. And I feel like I put so much pressure on myself to know, because I struggle with the unknown and not knowing what tomorrow will bring. And that has a lot, like, I need to know that. I need to trust in God and have faith in Him. But I just struggle with the unknown and not knowing what to do. And I don't know, that's kind of something that I've been struggling with.
Like, I have like a internal conflict with myself because like, whenever I came back from that business trip, I was like, you know, so pumped up, but like myself was like, maybe you should not do this, maybe you should not, cause like you could get like laughed at for it, but like who cares? Because you know you're like praising Him, you're like going out to serve Him. Yeah. But like with my friends, like I said, they don't really care what we speak, you know. Yeah. They're just there to like live their life. They don't really care about Jesus or anything like that. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know for me, like, especially after high school, you feel like you have to do something. Mm-hmm. And my mom was even asking me, like, what are you going to do? I mean, you're still in my house. You need to do something. And so, like I told you, I went to like community college and did culinary and stuff. And I took ministry classes for 2 years. And I got licensed and I got certified in the state of Alabama. I'm not from here. And then, I was feeling pressure because I was like, I'm a missionary. What am I going to do after this? Like, how am I, like, what's, like, after this, what am I going to do? Yeah. Like, do I need to, and like, I put so much pressure on myself, I've been on a couple missions trips and the people that we were there with, like gave me applications and stuff, and I was looking at applications and like, go over there for like a year by myself. Like, that's how much pressure I put on myself. And it was, but like, I know people kept telling me, okay, is this really what you want to do? Like, is this the calling God's putting on your life, or are you rushing yourself into this as something that you're not ready to do? So I took a step back, and I mean, lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm here. Yeah. So I mean, it's like, and it's crazy because whenever I moved here, no idea, no inkling. I didn't have a job for 2 weeks. There was like, I didn't know what I was gonna do. Yeah. I mean, at all. And then things just started falling into place, one after another. And I just knew I'm in God's will. So like at this point, I know I'm called to be a missionary, but at the same time, I'm never gonna ever rush that issue ever again, because that's when you get out of God's will. So.
Yeah. I like that. What do you think? Were you about to say something here?
Well, with me, about how they were talking about how they're like kind of scared about what's going to happen. Yeah. I feel like I am being called to doing missionary work and being like a doctor, because like me, I've always wanted to help you. That's all I've ever wanted to do is help those in need. And so just like, it is kind of nerve-wracking because whenever you're a doctor, you have to go to school for a long time. Yeah. But I mean, with me, like, school doesn't bother me because, I'm American at school, but it's just like, and then there are people that say, like, it's a lot of money. I was like, but it's what God's wanting me to do that I'm going to go into. Yeah. It doesn't matter how much money it is. Yeah. Like, God's going to take care of me and what I need to do.
Yeah. I like that. I think what it boils down to is that, like, we put a pressure on ourselves that God doesn't, you know? And I feel like it's in the moment where we have like self-inflicted pressure, and it's exactly what Markel was saying, is that we try to rush on ahead. Like, let's be honest, I think I read like a study recently, and it said like millennials, which would be you, and then Gen Zers, which would be, you know, the remaining of us, is that like we're so driven, and I feel like sometimes like our drive can like cause us to rush, like what you were saying. And it doesn't mean like we sit around being lazy, eating Cheetos on the couch and not do anything and graduate high school. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not that, but like I like what y'all were saying, because it's like we have to, you know, it's not a bad thing to have drive, but like I feel like we need to be driven by the Holy Spirit, and not just by motivation, you know, and a desire to prove ourselves. Because let's be real, sometimes like we'll be in a place in life and we'll see our friends who are, you know, flexing on Instagram or whatever, and you're like, man, they're out there killing it. Like I need to be doing that. You know what I'm saying? And we feel left behind. You know what I'm saying? Like we feel like, oh, they're progressing more than us, you know, and like, or they're dating, they're already engaged, you know, they're already, you know, they have this college degree, and like we feel like we're getting left behind. But, you know, I think we've got to be careful of that. Just like what y'all are saying, is that like, what are God's expectations? What are His dreams for my life, instead of, you know, the dreams other people place on us? You know what I'm saying? And so I think that even kind of goes with the final question. And I know we've hinted at it a lot, but do you think people place, or at least people in our lives, place their own plans on you? Does that make sense? Like people try to plan out your life for you. Like what have people said whenever you've said your plans? You're like, you know, maybe you should do this instead. I know we've hinted at it a little bit, but what else have y'all heard about that?
With my parents, I mean, like they're just trying to help because I am only 15, but like they're just trying to like get, because they've already been through that. Like they're kind of like planning out their life.
Right.
But like they're just trying to hint at like what should be best for me, because like, I mean, of course they care about me. They care about what I should do. But like they're just trying to get me out the door. They're just trying to put my foot out the door to like progress and get better and better as I grow older.
Yeah. You know, I hope we don't think that like, you know, I think even the Bible says, you know, there's wisdom in the counsel of many. You know, whenever we get advice, it's not like we should be like, oh no, I'm cold, I have this dream from God, get out of my way necessarily. But at the same time, you know, you wanna listen to wisdom, like obey our parents, you know what I'm saying? Like let's listen to those above us and our peers and our authority, you know, but also we gotta be able to discern like, okay, what is, you know, godly wisdom and what is just like, you know, personal advice. You know what I'm saying? And it is cool to be able to glean from people older than us, you know, to say like, hey, this is what happened to me. There's some, you know, barriers that you're going to have to hurdle if you go down this path, you know. So I think it's good to listen. But, you know, last week we were talking about when we had our actual ASM experience, we were talking about how, you know, there's certain obstacles come with being obedient to God. Like we have this idea almost sometimes, at least I have, is that like whenever like you become saved and you go after God's dream, like it's just gonna be like a red carpet laid out before you. You know what I'm saying? Have you ever thought like that? Like it's gonna be easy if God calls us to do it, it's gonna be a clear path. Have you ever thought that before? Markwell said no.
I grew up in a very Pentecostal church, and they tell you the truth, and they're like, look, if God has a calling on your life, it's gonna be hard. Yeah. So
right. So what do y'all think about that?
Because, like you said, it's not gonna be a red carpet. Because, like, as soon as you like give yourself, it's gonna be obstacle after obstacle. It's not gonna be like it's like a flowing river just going down. Yeah, you're gonna get stopped. Like you're gonna get stopped in your tracks, and then you're gonna feel like you can't even do anything because what happened there, you think it might hold you back, but no, you gotta keep on going because that's what Jesus wants you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But like what you were saying about that. The devil is gonna try and like stop you from doing what God is calling you to do, and so he's gonna just keep coming with all these obstacles, and all you gotta do is just keep your faith in God, and He'll lead you through it.
Yeah, for sure. And like and everything that happens, it happens for a reason. Is I mean, more times than not, it's God ordained, and even if something bad happens, doesn't mean we love to just blame Satan for stuff. But I mean, sometimes it's just God putting something in our way to see how we react to it and see how we experience. And every time we react to something, and every time we experience something, that just becomes part of our testimony. So so everything that we all go through, just like remember that, just like it's part of our testimony. Like I have so many testimonies that I can talk about. we'd be here for days, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I mean, it's life in general, and life with Christ is a continuous learning experience and a continuous testimony.
Yeah, I like that because I feel like, when it comes to, and the reason why we ask all these questions and bring up the idea of like obstacles is that, whenever you try to live out someone else's dream for your life and the obstacles come, guess what? I'm ready to quit. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't have something to fall back on. It's like, these are expectations others have put on me. Therefore, you don't feel like, the drive to want to keep going. But it's like, whenever you have like a dream from God, like what we've been talking about, like Joseph did, where even though he ended up in a pit, then he ends up in a prison, the whole time he knew he was called to royalty. And so it's like in the pit, he could keep in the back of his mind, I know this is a God dream. And so it's like whenever these obstacles come, which they will, we talk about it all the time, obstacles are tied with obedience. When you're obedient to God, obstacles are going to come. But like, it's like whenever they do come, when like, okay, I've got a word from God. I've got a promise to stand on. Like, I know this is what I'm called to do. It's what I'm passionate about. It's what I'm gifted in, whether it be being a doctor. And, next thing you know, you're up till 2 a.m. studying and you're miserable, and like, oh gosh, I'm going to end up in debt anyway. Should I just drop out? But at the same time, you'll have a dream from God and it'll be in here like, I can't. This is my dream. This is what God's instilled in me, Same for the ministry. Like when people are, trying to hurt you, because you know how it is. People attack ministers, and like people are talking bad about you, or you don't feel qualified. Like, guess what? You've got a dream from God, And so we're about to close this conversation, but I kind of want to leave you with a challenge or a thought, and I immediately, whenever I thought about us gathering together and having a talk, I thought about Abraham. He's the first person I thought of. And I thought about how God gave him a promise, or we could refer to it as a dream or an aspiration. And of course we know that it was his son Isaac, right? And he has this promise, and it's cool because God fulfilled the promise, right? He has a son despite old age, and his name's Isaac. And then God asked a very interesting request of Abraham, and it's to sacrifice Isaac. Do you want to know kind of what God was actually asking him to do? He was asking him to be willing to sacrifice his dream, to be obedient. He was asking him to sacrifice the very thing or the very promise that was fulfilled. And the reason why I bring that up is because it all boils back down to being in relationship with God, being obedient to God. Because if God is more important to you, or if I could word it this way, if his heart is more important than his hand, you don't have to worry about your dream. If you seek the heart of God, everything comes naturally. And we see that in the story of Abraham and Isaac, because obviously the end of the story ends in this. God was testing Abraham, and he asked him to not even end up following through with sacrificing his son. He let him fulfill and walk out his dream for his life, his aspiration. And so I think at the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. Am I willing to lay down my dream for God's glory, to know him more and to please him? Y'all agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Dream Talk. We have some further episodes planned for you guys in the future, but here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want you to get on ASMTV, our YouTube channel, and I want you to click the subscribe button. But not only that, I want you to go ahead and press the bell notifications. That way you can stay up to date every time we post a new episode. Now, the plan right now is that every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, a brand new episode will be uploaded. And so I want you to make sure to stay up to date, to know what's going on here at ASM. And we can't wait for next week, episode 2 of Dream Talk. We'll see you next Wednesday.